Now, for years, Geoff Wilson, Chairman and Chief Investment Officer at Wilson Investment Management, has championed investors' causes, including a fight against the Labor Party's proposed changes to dividend imputation, which, for now at least, has been won. There are also rules about who should be considered a retail or a professional investor. And ahead of the federal budget, he's again concerned the government's intervening into markets, especially picking out companies with its future made in Australia policy. I caught up with him earlier today.
But there's a number of things that have concerned me. More recently, Jim Chalmers' comments yesterday about, it looks like going to a protectionism stance from an Australian perspective. Unfortunately, Australia doesn't prosper in those circumstances. If you look at what we've done historically, say, look at our car industry. We spent 50 years on that experiment, and what are the hundreds of millions of dollars that the government lost in terms of trying to subsidise that? So
how does the government balance that up about trying to support a manufacturing industry here in Australia? I mean, you've invested in these over a long period of time, a lot of them not so good, some of them okay. How do you work out, whether Australia can sustain future manufacturing?
I mean, how good is the government of picking winners? To me, $1 billion for a solar farm, what's our competitive advantage there? $1 billion for quantum computing, which is probably a decade away. Nice in theory, but what happens to everyone else that was setting up a quantum computing business? Does that mean, we're not going to get funded from the government? So to me, it makes the playing field very unlevel, and it's picking winners, and I just don't think that's the right way to go.
But you spent your whole life picking winners as an investment manager. So you've picked some winners along the way, you've picked some losers along the way. Why can't the government do the same thing?
Well, I'm not that keen on them taxing me and using my money to invest in something that I believe may not have a competitive advantage from an Australian perspective. So to me, if the government can prove that they have that abilities, and the first two, it's not only the picking of the winners, but it's just discouraging anyone else to compete in that area.
Can I suggest that maybe an alternative strategy, rather than giving money out directly, is to give tax incentives, capital gains tax reliefs, some sort of relief on company tax in the first few years that they exist? Are these other ways the government could have gone?
To me, it's got to be significantly more innovative. And the whole idea of sort of the protectionism stance that the government's talking about, unfortunately, it doesn't benefit Australia. Like in terms of our per capita position in the world, when we've been protectionist, we've declined significantly.
So then take me to something else, which is the campaign you've got at the moment in regards to superannuation caps, because it sort of feeds into this, and that is you're arguing that cap should not be including unrealised capital gains, because a lot of businesses, small businesses or farmers or whatever, that they might be disadvantaged by that.
It is just so unfair, bringing in a tax on unrealised capital gains where what it'll do, it'll just discourage people. There's close to $1 trillion in self-managed super funds. Why would you take a risk? You're better off having your money in the bank. Why would you take a risk when the value of your assets may over June 30 significantly increase? Then you have to pay tax, and then the next month they might significantly decline because high risk plays have significant volatility, and what we want is those trillions and trillions of superannuation dollars to be investing in Australia, because then you pay tax in Australia, you employ Australians. That's what we want to happen.
Does this government have to be careful as it's trying to promote itself as being pro-business by giving out these handouts, that it actually at the same time is not becoming seen as being anti-business?
100%. And a couple of the bits of legislation last year which we fought against, which impacts on the franking system. To me, they're negative in terms of if a company raises capital and that capital they raise is associated with a fully franked dividend, then that dividend isn't franked. So to me, I'm not that keen on what's what the government, the various policies there coming out. I don't think they are pro-business.
And just very quickly, that fight on dividend imputation, you said there were tweaks last year. Is the fight on dividend imputation over in this government's mind, do you think?
I don't think so. And I remember Paul Keating, he brought in the system, and a brilliant system, and it's put us in such great stead in terms of encouraging Australian companies to pay tax in Australia. The compliance of paying tax in Australia is probably the best in the world for Australian companies because they pay fully franked dividends out, and it encourages companies to employ people in Australia. So Keating said, I think in early 2013, that he said every 7 years Treasury will try to dismantle the franking system. We're the only one in the world that has this exact system, and it works beautifully. Like in the UK, they had a system similar to this called the Advanced Corporation Tax System. It lasted from 1973 to 1999. In 1999, the pension funds over there owned 40% of the listed companies. They got rid of the system. The pension funds over there own less than 6% of the listed companies. Why has the UK market performed so badly? Is because they can't get access to capital from their own superannuation and pension funds. And that's why the franking system works so incredibly well here. We're all investing in Australian companies that pay tax in Australia, that employ Australians. And we've just got to keep that structure. And the risk is, they've taken a few little bits off last year, is they continue to try to dismantle it. That's what worries me.
Geoff Wilson, many thanks for your time.
Thanks, Ross.